Good morning and welcome to a new video. This time around we're going to do something that is perfect timing for me because I have just finished writing my draft 2. I wrote the end for the second time on my novel Rules of Survival. You can watch all about it in the entire series that I've been doing vlogging this journey. But essentially that means that I'm suddenly finding myself with a little bit of free time because I've just given it to my critique partners and I am not touching this book for a month and a half. I'm not touching it until the end of the month of July. And my brain has been percolating with a few different ideas and I'm just really itching to get my hands on one of my other ideas that's been in the back of my mind that I may have every now and then looked at a tiny little bit but not really fully plunged into. And so I thought I would do a two-parter. We're gonna do a first video here today where we're just gonna go through my general process to get ideas and go from an idea to the actual outline of a novel. And then we'll be doing a second video where I'm actually going to do it with one of the ideas that I've had recently because I really want to start working on it and I feel like it would be fun for me to talk you guys through the process while I'm actually doing it and just show you how I work on that. But in this part one, let's just go through my general process from idea to outline. Okay, so step one is to get an idea, and for a lot of people this is extremely easy, they just have them all the time, and then for a bunch of people it's absolutely not that easy and they do struggle a lot more to get new ideas. I'm here to reassure you with one thing: you do not have a singular idea in your brain. You have more than that, you can come out with more than that, you can write more than one book. For me there's two ways that I get new ideas. There's the subconscious way and then there is the conscious, purposeful way. Subconsciously, most of my ideas come from the media that I consume. Every type of media. I obviously read a lot. I also watch a lot of TV shows. I watch every now and then some movies, but I guess I'm more of a TV show person. And I listen to a ton of music. And funnily enough, I think that's one of the main ways that I get my ideas through music. But that's largely influenced by the media that I've already consumed before, which is all the TV shows and movies that I watch and the books that I've read. Then there's also some outliers in that media that I consume, things that are not specifically fiction or that would be so obviously inspiration, such as the news. Every now and then there's weird bits of news that I read that make my brain go, oh, that would be interesting. For some people, and I'm thinking particularly of the authors I know who write more thriller vibes, a lot of their ideas come from people watching, like observing other types of people who live differently, like maybe really rich people. I'm thinking, for instance, when I went to a talk by Lucy Foley, who's an author of thrillers. I've read a few books by her. I really love her writing, and she had just finished writing one where a murder happens in a sort of really expensive hotel resort type of place, and she was saying that the ideas came to her after going to this kind of place herself and just observing how these people were interacting with one another and just sort of like the levels between what's on the surface and what's below it. I thought that was really interesting, and I think a lot of thriller authors tend to get inspiration from news, people watching, and even just stories that their friends tell them or talking to other people. So it's not just about the media you consume, it's about everything you consume. And I think all of that plays a part subconsciously. But then what makes me work with these ideas afterwards is that I do some conscious effort to make them come out of my brain. So there is the purposeful aspect of it. This is the part that I think a lot more people struggle with, and I think some people expect an idea to just fall from the sky into their brain and that's it. And I think for some it does happen. But I also think that it is a trained thing and that you can train your brain to make that happen more often by doing some things purposefully. So for me, the big one, especially in the last couple of years, has been taking a walk while listening to music. And I never really thought about it that way, but when I was younger, that was already the case. I never realized that my daydreaming when I was on my way to school and I was in my mom's car or on public transport was putting music in my ears, listening to my new playlist and just letting my brain go with it and daydream. That's actually where a lot of my ideas come from. It's my daydreaming, and my daydreaming is never more powerful than when I'm listening to good music. I will also sometimes feel like I have sparks of an inspiration for something more sci-fi, let's say, and then I will purposefully watch more sci-fi TV shows and movies, or I'll try to read something that's in a similar genre just because I want to like fuel that idea. see if it can develop into something more than just the little spark that's the very beginning of it. And so I think that's the other purposeful part, is just trying to feed the spark by adding a little bit more fuel to the fire. A lot of my daydreaming ends up in action scenes. It's usually things like a fight scene that I picture first and foremost before anything else, and it kind of infers a lot of information about the character that I'm daydreaming about and why they're fighting, and then the universe they're in and the setting, and like slowly it expands. It's like a tiny little spark, and then it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger as I work on the concept. But the very, very beginning is just me taking a walk, listening to music, and picturing this action-y type of scene. Some real examples for me have been, for instance, the book I was just talking about, Rules of Survival. The very first spark of the idea for it was a scene that did end up making it in the book. It is the stasis pod scene. So at some point my characters end up having to go into stasis pods to travel through a lightspeed gate. And when they're about to get into the stasis pods, everyone gets in. My main character Themis is trying to open hers and it doesn't open, and she starts to panic because things are about to get really, really, really cold in the room and she's going to die if she doesn't manage to open the pod. And then last minute, the male main character Axel grabs her into his pod, and there's a little bit of a romantic flirty scene there. And I had that scene before I had anything else. This was the spark of the idea, and then it became a zombie story. So you just don't know how you're going to develop your first initial concept, but that's why it's important to fuel the fire. So the second step is, once you have your spark, is to try and take notes and just go with your stream of consciousness. For me, I do everything on Notion, and I find it useful because I have a gallery of ideas. I'll pop it up there. It's literally just a gallery page, and I just add a new page every single time I feel like I have a new idea, and I start taking bullet point notes. I think it's important at this stage to keep it unorganized. Like, the whole point is just stream of consciousness, anything that comes to your mind every single time something comes to your mind. So it's not a one-day process that you just sit down and start writing things down. I usually do this on the go when I'm thinking, oh, I've been thinking about this a lot and I should write it down before I forget. And so I start writing a couple more bullet points, and then I'll leave the page, I'll go about my day, I'll go about my week, maybe I'll go about my month, and then later I'll be like, oh my god, I've got more ideas that I need to write into this page, and add some bullet points. That's all this is at that stage. And very often the reason why it takes so long is because I'm currently working on something else, and so I don't actually have the time to start working on this new idea. So all it is just an idea page somewhere, so that I don't lose track of every little bullet point idea that I've got for it, and that I can jump back into it and be fueled back in by that inspiration that I wrote down. So that's my step 2. My step 3 is to make this little idea page inside this bigger gallery graduate to a bigger official page on my Notion. You can do that obviously in any other format. I just use Notion a lot because this is helpful for me in how my brain functions, but you may be using pen and paper, you may be using a notebook that is dedicated to your ideas, you could be using Obsidian, Word, Scrivener, whatever it is. But in Notion, usually for me, I will then evolve the little one pager with a bunch of bullet points to a proper separate page that is going to hold different pages for all the bits of information that are to do with this idea. And the reason why I say graduate or evolve is because at that point it's not a singular scroll down one page, it becomes more of an organized folder where I put a bunch of things in it. I usually do this at the stage where I feel like I've got enough / too many bullet points, and I feel like it's become more and I need to actually start classifying this information because it's all over the place. And this is where I've basically got 3 categories of things where I will place my bullet points in and start developing them. So I will generally have character information. Very often, especially nowadays, since working more actively on trying to develop better characters, I feel like that comes first more often for me, while it used to be more plot first and character second. But nowadays, I will often go with characters first. And so I'll have a page that is dedicated to the characters, and then it's usually another gallery page. And in this gallery page, I'll often have my 3 main characters or my 4 main characters or whatever it is. The characters I already know exist. And I might even just have one new page for a secondary character that I know exists, and just like a single bullet point in this, and that's it, nothing more. But all I need is to classify and organize this information so that I can get back to this folder and know, oh, I've got a little bit more information on this character now, let me add a second bullet point, and I know where it goes and I'm not going to lose it. So that's the idea, is I try to organize myself at this stage, and often it comes down to creating character pages for individual characters, creating world building pages. That's another thing, is very often I'll be like, okay, I know the setting now, because I write more sci-fi and fantasy. Usually the setting will be important and my world building pages will play a role. So I will have maybe like a page on the world politics, a page on the spaceships and what they look like, things like that. Or if we are talking about rules of survival, I think I had a page on Panacea, which is the planet where they go, and the settlement in it, which is Ambrosia Alpha. I had a page on the substance, which is the thing that makes people go zombie-like. All of these things will have an individual page. It's a slow development. Again, at this stage, all I'm doing is adding in bit by bit whenever I can think of new things to add in. I'm not doing it all at once. I feel like, especially if I am still working on something else, I don't have time to do that. So it's more of a reference point and just starting the organization process. And the third aspect will be actually the outline aspect. So I will maybe start a page that will be about the story, and I will just create card scenes or bullet points that I'll just copy and paste from my original idea. And they're just going to be scene ideas, because I usually start, my spark of my idea is usually a scene, and then it'll develop into several of the scenes, and I'll just have some bullet points that are like, the main character does this and that, and then this is why the guy reacts like this, or literally like the stasis pod scene. This was a scene that I knew was going to exist in the book at some point. I just didn't know where it was going to be placed yet. So I'll start creating a plot, you know, from these scenes later on, but at that stage I'm just putting them somewhere where it makes more sense. This is also the stage where, in parallel with that, I'll try to feel more of the inspiration by potentially trying to picture my characters better or my world better. And that will come down to mood boarding a lot. So if I'm doing any mood boarding, it's usually at that stage. Sometimes I'll do a cover. This is pretty much around the stage I did a cover for Rules of Survival. Sometimes I don't do a full mood board, but I just look for imagery that sort of represents my characters that I could use as inspiration. It's kind of what I did for Rules of Survival. I had more of an anime vibe in my head rather than you know, real actors type of look and feel for the people in my book, and so I ended up looking for anime styles, illustration styles for my main characters, Themis, Axel, and also Saturn, and I had these three pinned down pretty early on. Sometimes I will do a full mood board. So I've done this, for instance, for An Office for Monsters. I've done this for Knights of Death. Knights of Death is a big one because it has several, like quite a lot of POVs and main characters in here, and I just needed to be able to differentiate them in my head more. So I felt like the mood boarding process was really helpful, and did it quite early on to get a better understanding of each character for when I was going to write them. World building, similarly, if I have anything that I need to picture, this is also where I will do some research. It doesn't always come down to mood boarding. It's not always something you have to make into an aesthetic mood board. Sometimes it's just to add a couple of images through the pages on my Notion page. So for instance, Rules of Survival, I knew what the settlement was going to look like in my head, and it's only later on around draft 2 that I started looking for better imagery, because I was making more of an effort to really describe things, and I wanted to make sure that I did it correctly and that it gave the right idea. So I collected a couple of images that I put together on my Notion page to represent the settlement. These are just from Pinterest. Very often my image research is Pinterest, pretty much never from anywhere else. So if you're wondering where people get their mood boarding stuff from, it's usually Pinterest. However, there's a lot of AI stuff. I think there is a toggle thing where you can turn it off, but it's not very accurate still. I would also just recommend looking through Google in general for other types of images if you have a very specific idea and you're thinking, I just want to picture it, it's not for the aesthetic aspect, it's just for me to visualize it, then potentially just Google it. Finally, we get to step 4, which is the outlining part. I usually will not start this part until I have a very solid idea of who my characters are. And I say usually, I think it's just more my recent process that has evolved into becoming this, because I am a reformed pantser. And when I was a pantser, I would just plunge straight in. But now I have become more and more of an outliner, and I feel like this is a more solid process that I'm really happy with, especially since it worked so well for me with Rules of Survival. So this is what I'm gonna do moving forward. There's two things I need in preparation for my outlining process. The first one is the characters, like I've just said. I need to have a pretty solid idea of who my main characters are, especially in terms of their backstory and potentially if they have any secrets they're keeping, anything that takes place before the story starts. I need to know this. And sometimes it'll be something I've already figured out. Sometimes I'll figure it out as I start the outlining process, but pretty early on. And then second, I will also need my bullet point scenes that I was talking about in step 3. So all the scenes that I know need to be slotted somewhere, but I just haven't figured out where yet. Or sometimes I know, sometimes I'm like, that's my midpoint for sure. I need both of these items and then I can start the process. And then the way that I like to outline is an amalgamation of two techniques. I like to use Save the Cat as a basis for my beat sheet. It's a little bit modified. I use also Character Arcs by K.M. Wayland, which is essentially an overlay of the character arc itself as a story on top of the beat sheet for Save the Cat. It's very similar. It follows a similar pattern. But that works for me because I feel like my stories have become more character-based, and it's kind of a mixture between the action-y plot, the story, and the character, and I feel like they feed each other so much that they cannot be separated anymore in my head. My outline process is then just a table format. I like to work with a table, and I also like to work with cards. You can see them next to my bookshelves. These are the early days card that I had for Rules of Survival, and I think the color coding was my acts, so I might be wrong, but I think it was all the white cards were for Act 1 and then the blue ones for Act 2, etc. So there's not one single technique for this. I think everyone has their own beat sheet, their own way of working, their own outline process. Some people like to do a very simple outline, some people go much more into detail. I personally like to do a bit of both. I like to go at first with more broad strokes of my acts and sort of the beats in my beat sheet. I'm not a chapter outliner. I don't like to outline my chapters in advance of writing, but I will outline often per scene because I know this is one scene, this is another scene. But because I've done the work of classifying, organizing my world building and my characters on my Notion page as well, this is where this process informs each other and just feeds into each other, and I do a lot of back and forth between the outline process and going back to the pages for the world building and the characters, because I'm discovering new things as I'm doing my outline and I'm realizing, ooh, I need more information about the monetary system or something, or I need more information about the political vibes of this place, or what's this character's allegiance, or what they actually look like, because I didn't plot that out, but now I need this information because it's pretty... Anyway, anything that becomes relevant is then fed into the world building pages and the character pages and back and forth. So that's where I'm really happy to have that organization system at that stage. And that's it. That was actually the last step. We now have an outline, and then I will start writing, and I often discover or write a few things, including maybe the actual voice of my characters, but that's it. At that stage I am ready to write, and so that's what I'm hoping to do for the next month and a half, is sort of work on one of these ideas. And I was thinking I would take you guys along for the ride, not throughout the full thing. I don't think I'm gonna do another entire vlogging journey like I did for Rules of Survival, but I would like to, at the very least, do what we've said in this video in action, like put it in action and actually take one of my sparks and make it into a fully fledged idea, and then make it into the beginning of an outline. I think that's what we will do in part 2. And if you're looking forward to it, then feel free to subscribe so you can be notified when that video comes up. And we'll see you guys in the next one.